firstly, Tim, thank you so very much for doing this. Really appreciate you taking your time and sharing your knowledge and information about Web 3.0 and Sprint. Now, before we kickstart today's episode, just wanted to check, how has your day been so far? And we are recording this session on a Monday at 8 a.m. Gulf Standard Time. So, how has your day been so far?
It's been going great. Yeah, I've been trying to reach all my partners, and one is in Turkey, one is in London. So, but it's a great day so far. Thanks.
Mondays are usually busy, isn't it?
Totally, yes.
Absolutely brilliant. Once again, Tim, thank you so very much for doing this. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritties of Web 3.0 and Sprint, can you tell our listeners a brief history about your work experience? Because look, I went through your LinkedIn profile, and you have well over 20,000 followers. And you also have a very strong experience developing strategies and blockchain application in areas such as DeFi, supply chain management, and you're also a member of the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance as well, right? So I'm pretty much sure listeners would love to know more about your working history.
So I was more of a dilettante in crypto until around 2018. I was an engineer manager at Google, and but I was really excited about it. I happened to hear Vitalik Buterin give a talk, and so I really got excited about it, and I thought it was a great idea for me to take some ideas I had and build a project for blockchain. So I left Google. I managed to raise some funds in Silicon Valley, and I started my journey in Web3 blockchain at that time. Since then, I've created a company to help other people who are start their journey, and we're called Fuixlabs. And we do a lot of work for a lot of the blockchains like Cardano and Ethereum and Algorand. And we also work with entrepreneurs to help them build some of their products. And on this journey, something we still are doing, we have released several products, but on this journey, I happened to meet Seven Sal, who had an idea around payment system, and I thought it was a really great idea. So I've been putting a lot of effort into that, and now I'm a co-founder of a company along with them, payments company.
That's
so
absolutely
a bit long.
No, I think it's absolutely brilliant. And what I'm going to do is, in the show notes, I'm definitely going to go ahead and put in your LinkedIn profile. Because as I mentioned, you've got well over 25,000 followers. You have a phenomenal technical experience. And you've also been a CEO and co-founder for the projects as well. So, I'm sure our listeners who are long duration will definitely benefit by following you. Now, Tim, before we delve into Sprint, a project that you're actively involved in, I'd like to explore, how it intersects with Web 3.0. But before that, you being a chief technology officer and co-founder from Sprint, what I want to understand is, what is your definition of Web 3.0 or Web 3? How would you define Web 3?
So Web3 is taking what essentially we have today is networks, right? So everything from Google, Facebook, Twitter, everything is Web2. And it's been building networks, and these networks have just by economic forces sort of become centralized, and now we have a group of centralized companies that control most of the data and most of our communication. And this was not how things started out, because early on in Web 1, it was very decentralized, and we had a lot of protocols to build on. And the economic activity was out at the edges, not in the center. And now we're entering into Web3, and Web3 is taking us from networks to economies. So now we actually, because through technologies like blockchain and NFTs and such, now we can actually have ownership. So now, in a sense, we're actually returning a little bit to the way the model was originally, where economic activity is happening at the edges. We have protocols in the center, which we know are not going to change, and they're not governed by anybody, and nobody's charging for them. And so economies are now growing from bottom up, rather than the Web 2, where it's largely been economies have been growing from top down.
wherein there's a lot of centralization. And what I really liked, you mentioned about communication, and I'm pretty much sure
Mm-hmm.
you've seen what is going on in the political spectrum as well, because
Yep.
there's a lot of centralized entity, and they are taking control over what we communicate as well. So, am I right in saying when it comes to Web 3.0 or Web 3, we users have control in what we have to say, but at a protocol level, is it still the centralized entity that dictates what is it that we can speak, or will it be possible, let's say, for us users to go ahead and say what we can say, what we cannot say? What are your thoughts on that?
So everything will be on sort of entrepreneurs to build the new technologies, but the frameworks are there within technology. The immutability that we call for blockchain allows for the development of chat spaces and email applications that nobody owns. So we're still, I think, waiting for those entrepreneurs to come in and seize that opportunity and figure a way to make it pay for itself and pay for their development. But I have no doubt that we will soon see a new crop of social media applications that are decentralized.
No, Tim, I'll be completely honest with you. 2016, before the elections, Charles Hoskinson, who is a co-founder of Ethereum and co-founder of Cardano, he actually mentioned that they are actually working on building a protocol that will work on the voting system. 2016 happened, nothing turned out to fruitful. 2020, there was a bit of drama, so was, blockchain applications for elections, nothing happened. And a few days ago, he went on YouTube and he's saying that we are still in the process of developing a Web 3.0. He didn't actually mention Web 3.0, but a voting system that is going to work on blockchain that will ensure one person, one vote. Unfortunately, I don't think so that is going to happen as well. So what are your thoughts on that? Where there is no central entity managing or rather manipulating, let's say, the voting mechanism, do you think Web3 fits into that area as well? What are your thoughts on that?
My feeling is we have to be very, very careful about that. And I know when Charles Hoskins mentioned that, they're building a DID-based system called the Tala Prism.
Yeah.
And it's tangential to the blockchain, but it's a closed source, which I think you never should have in a voting application. And its purpose is commercial. So we're still, I feel, still waiting for that application that we can trust to use in voting. But I'm sure it will come.
Hopefully sooner than later. And Tim, yeah, one of the criticism often directed, let's say, at Web 3.0, as you can also see, let's say, with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, is the user experience. Now, what I think is, and let me know if I'm wrong, I think whenever there's, let's say, a new technology, a new protocol or project that is developed, it has to be at least 10 times better than what we are currently experiencing, or else people are not going to switch. A classic example I can think of is Threads. They have 100 million users in just a matter of 24 hours. But if you were to compare Threads, let's say, with Twitter, if you ask this question, are they offering a 10x better user experience? I feel if the answer is no, people are not going to switch. Even if they switch, they're not going to continue, as in the case of Threads. What are your thoughts on that? I could be wrong on it as well. What are your thoughts on it?
No, I feel 100% that you hit the nail on the head there, and that's something we do a lot of work on, is usability for Web3. I think part of it is just because a lot of the development is bottom up, and that's a problem innate with bottom up. You have engineers with bright ideas, and they don't know how to productize. So a lot of the productizing expertise, like focus groups and doing careful UX design, isn't really always baked into Web3 products, not yet. But also, a lot of applications have had a lot of time to mature. For instance, if you use a credit card, you have things like chargebacks. You have things, like guarantees, and that's that actually builds a lot of usability into payment rails, credit card payment rails. So at this time, I think we're maturing very quickly. That's one of the things that we're looking at very carefully, how to add sort of this Web 2 infrastructure like chargebacks and such to enhance Web3 and make it, as you say, palatable for the user.
Now, see, when you mentioned about credit card, that just caught me a thought that I do remember credit card. I believe was invented going back to 1950s, if I'm not mistaken. And it does take time, maybe a couple of decades for mainstream adoptions. So keeping that thing in mind, maybe Web 3.0, maybe in the next, maybe a few decades might be mainstream. I mean, that is one possibility, I guess. And
I think things have to change. So the credit cards right now, you have particularly the neobanks. The banks largely started in China, banking as a service, and they're starting to do transactions at very low costs, like less 0.05% and almost 2 seconds. And that's compared to a credit card that actually does clearing at the end of the day and probably takes you like 3%. So that gap, there's a gap there. And then like in the economic world, that's like a vacuum. That vacuum can't exist. At some point, the current systems have to upgrade or they have to be replaced.
Now you mentioned something really brilliant about neobanking, and earlier in the morning I was going through your website as well. And what I'll do is, I'll mention that in the show links for our listeners as well, because it does make a very good comparison in what neobanking does and what Sprynt does. And you've kind of broken down into the same areas like, time, cost, and quality, even user experience and decentralization, and even censorship resistant. I'll definitely have one question based around that. But one question, Tim, that I wanted to ask, and this is to do with Web 3.0, and let me know if I'm wrong, and then we move on to talking about Sprynt. What I feel is, let's say if I go to Facebook and if I check something, Facebook gets access to my data, but at the same time, Facebook or let's say Google, they do offer, let's say, pop-up ads that eventually helps me as well. And the classic example I can think of is, let's say, a drum equipment. I have used a trigger module. And Google did actually pop up one of the modules, which I wasn't even aware about it. And because of that, I actually went ahead and purchased it. Now, there are dangers to that also, but what are your thoughts about, some of the benefits that centralization does actually offer? And I'm sure that is not the right things to say. But when we have, let's say, the same thing, let's say if we have a Google-based system on a Web3 protocol, I'm not sure if we will be able to get those pop-ups and recommend things, something which is suited for the users. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a very slippery slope. So of course that we're enticed to give data because we get these great things like email and so on back. So when we see something pop up and say, oh, there's a new terms of service, we don't read it, we click yes and move on, right? Unfortunately, a lot of those terms of services they're increasingly invasive, and there's still a controversy just last week about Zoom having a pop-up that appeared to say that they have all intellectual property rights on anything discussed in that conversation. The controversy required them to come back and do a clarification, but there's still many people who are wondering if that clarification didn't just go a little further. So if you look at the data today, any survey, people are very unhappy with the way the big companies are handling their data. So anywhere from 40, in many cases 70% would rather not give their data, but really we have no choice. And choice is the answer, not going all the other way and saying we don't give data. And that's where we have things like DID, decentralized ID, which allows us to own our own data and then make choices about what we share and to whom. And if we all have that control, then I think we would go back to Google and say, yeah, we like to use it, but no, we're not going to give you our location or allow you to eavesdrop on our speech with your Android. Yeah. That's going too far. So it will give us some negotiating ability, but the awareness is there that we're compromising ourselves with allowing sort of a carte blanche. Take all my data. I want to use Gmail.
Yeah. So am I right in saying, Tim, one way to weigh that would be, let's say if you were to log into Facebook, rather than using, let's say, your mobile number or let's say your email address, I would use, let's say, my Ethereum login ID and password. Will that be a part of area where Web3 merges, let's say with Web 2.0?
I'm not clear where it would be. I think now we have a few standards coming out that will allow us to have like IDs on the blockchain.
Yeah.
And I think something like a global ID that we control, not linked to any biometrics, but something that's recoverable, is something that everybody is working on now. All the big blockchains have ID projects, and some geniuses in that area will solve the login problem.
And that is an area where I think, OpenAI, they're working on WorldCoin as well. So I'm not sure if you've heard of WorldCoin. What are your thoughts about WorldCoin? Because that does actually take into consideration the DID to a certain extent, isn't it?
Yeah, it does. No, I think it's a little bit terrifying. I think DID is, we're aware of the potential benefits and also the potential dangers of products like ChatGPT.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, this DID and decentralized ID has more potential for good and much, much more potential for bad than even ChatGPT does. I don't think we can just allow anybody to have our ID or capture our biometrics, because that requires a very, very optimistic view of our world history and the things that somebody can do if they turn out to be not good guys.
Absolutely, 100% agree. And the founders of WorldCoin, Sam Altman and another co-founder, they did have an episode with Bankless. I'm not sure if you've heard the episodes or podcast rather. What they've actually went ahead and they've actually broken down how they've created a physical device. So they have a round object called as an orb. So you go in front of that physical device, do your facial recognition, but what they have said is that they are using zero knowledge proof, and you need to log in, let's say, with your Ethereum private key, and then you are in full control of your data, not WorldCoin or Sam Altman. And the fact that they're merging it with zero knowledge proof makes it technically very secure. But the world of cryptocurrency is crazy. We love to bash on other people also. So unfortunately, in my Crypto and Coffee Day podcast today, I actually mentioned that the token has gone down by well over 50%.
I heard that, yeah.
We're actually bashing about them. So what are your thoughts about, decentralized identity? Do you think that would actually fall into the whole Web3 arena? And there are also, a couple of dangers to it as well. Let's say if someone were to hack it, or let's say in the smart contract audit, there is a hack. In case of a centralized entity, going back to Web 2, let's say Facebook or let's say Google, I could actually go call up the customer service, get it fixed. But what happens, let's say, if that thing happens on a Web 3? If someone hacks it, or if I accidentally share my private key, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I have to say that one of the products that at Fuixlabs we built is a decentralized ID platform.
Okay.
And part of it was just because I couldn't find any other decentralized platforms that I trust. And I was concerned because a lot of these decentralized applications are closed source, first of all. And I would never trust a decentralized my identity to a closed source application. They can tell me they're using zero knowledge proof. They can tell me whatever they like. I mean, it wasn't long ago when Google and Microsoft and all the Yahoo were telling us, or Twitter was telling us they weren't saving our data, they weren't collecting our data, and they were, but they lied to us. So it's not within the decentralization ethos to trust people to say, we're using zero knowledge proof, just trust us. So we made our DIDS service open source, first of all. And then the other thing that I find very concerning is that they're commercial. So there's this big backlash of people who don't want to share their data, and companies want to obtain their data anyway. So they're paying a lot of money for decentralized ID and the brand decentralized. And when people hear that, they say, oh, I'm controlling my own data. But why is a company paying them $20 million to use their service if they're not getting a hold of this data? It doesn't make sense. So I think open source, non-commercial, verifiable using the blockchain is the starting point for being able to trust a decentralized ID system. And then eventually there should be, I think in general, blockchain and the community should start having groups of technologists who then may be incentivized to research and find problems. Maybe you get $1 million if you find a way that somebody who's saying they keep your ID, but they don't really. So some incentivization scheme to double check just in case somebody has some backdoors there.
The next question what I wanted to ask is, Tim, what is it that Fuixlabs is doing right now, and what is the future direction it is heading towards at?
So Fuixlabs is still very active. We're working with University of Singapore, Uni, and we're working on a meta language for smart contracts so that we can solve the problem once and for all about money being leaked from contracts. And we do that using technology where we can use called formal verification, which actually proves there are no bugs. We're also working with Commonlands, so we're building a mobile app for Commonlands, and we're we're working on some carbon footprint applications. So we're like pretty selective on the projects we take, but we're also always willing to help out if we see a product with real potential and something that can have real impact. And we really love working on those kinds of projects.
That is great. So it looks like you guys are focusing on corporate social responsibility quite diligently, right?
Yes, we try to take projects that we can feel passionate about. And yeah, anything in Web3 is obviously in our wheelhouse, but also things like carbon credit and financial inclusion in Africa are big parts of are things we really enjoy doing. It's a pleasure.
And Tim, do you think over the next coming years, do you think artificial intelligence will definitely help, in identifying these areas as well? What are your thoughts about artificial intelligence merging with carbon footprints?
I think artificial intelligence is definitely going to make a big difference. I'm working very hard, taking a couple MIT courses to sort of learn the deep parts of AI, but it doesn't seem at this point, it seems like the evidence is there that it's going to make a very, very large impact on all areas of our society.
Absolutely.
And be beneficial, and I think carbon footprint will definitely be impacted positively by AI.
Absolutely. And what are your thoughts on central bank digital currencies? Do you think they fall under the Web3 or Web2 arena? Because I'm not an advocate of central bank digital currencies because they do have access to 100% of your data and also of your spendings as well. But like it or not, CBDCs are going to be mainstream as well.
Yeah, I find it, I guess, very confusing to see exactly how it works. So now we have a dollarized economy where the whole world has got dollars in their bank.
Yeah.
So how are you, if for instance, the U.S. goes to central bank currency, digital currency, how are we going, are we automatically then going to be able to revoke all the tokens that are in, let's say, Saudi Arabia's bank, India's bank, China's bank, So it doesn't even, it doesn't seem like that kind of control actually goes with good global citizens.
Yeah.
So that's concerning. It's also concerning that we've seen some cases in Canada where, for instance, there were some truckers who were
Absolutely.
posing and their bank accounts were drained. So now you have the ultimate stick for the state. And I very much believe that we kind of have lost something in history, that this sort of power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And we now kind of are relying on the thing that will have a continuous stream of good guys in office. But somewhere along the line, there may be another Mao Zedong, another Stalin. And if they come into power, when we have central bank digital currencies, they could just snap their fingers and cause mass starvation by anybody who disagrees with them. So it's a very scary.
Absolutely, 100% agree. And currently what is going on in US right now, it is definitely not looking ideal. And at the same time, you mentioned about Canada. Right now, one of the news so far from a political point of view is concerned is about Nigel Farage. His bank account is being closed in UK. So he's actually fighting about, his banking industry. And he's a massive advocate of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. So he was the guy who actually made Brexit possible. So absolutely, definitely brilliantly said. So the next question what I wanted to ask is, about Sprynt. So can you tell our listeners, Tim, what is Sprynt and how did you become involved with Sprynt?
Yeah, so Sprynt is a modern payment system, a modern crypto payment system. We are doing solving some problems that we see is fairly large. There are 420 million crypto owners, but they all own different crypto, and they may be fanatics about one crypto blockchain, but not the other. So we have a very segmented demographic, and what could actually end up having a lot of power based on their market power, just based on it's the size of U.S. and Germany. I think it's approximately that size. So I'll double check that. But so one of the issues that we have to solve is that if I own a token, let's call it token XYZ, and you have an NFT and it's, let's say, minted on Ethereum. If I want to buy your NFT, I shouldn't have to first bridge my funds, which is very risky and it's going to take me 15 minutes and it's going to cost a lot out of my pocket.
Yeah.
And then convert my funds and then buy it. So I think in any we were talking earlier about kind of lacking knowledge about productization in the market, but anything that involves a user to take those steps is just a non-starter.
Yeah.
So we borrowed some theories around banking, correspondent banking, which allows the user to deposit their token in their own chain on a smart contract on their own chain and pay for your NFT. So now we've reduced the cost because we're not using all these intermediary bridges and DEXs. And we've also increased the speed and we've decreased the risk. So now we're as we were discussing the progress of the neobanks and how quickly they're coming. Now we're sort of seeing a way that we can use crypto payments, be competitive with the neobank on rates and speed and usability.
And Sprynt, is there any particular blockchain platform that you're planning to build it on, or how does that thing work?
So let's say you're a seller, just for time saying it's NFT, but it could be tennis shoes or anything.
Yeah.
So what you would do is you would log into our system, you would press one button to set up.
Okay.
And we would create smart contracts that you own on right now up to 6 blockchains, soon up to 20 blockchains. And then if I live on one of those blockchains, I deposit and I want to buy something in your store, I deposit my money in your contract on my favorite blockchain. And then, yep. Then we go into the bid system where we create a verifiable credential for that deposit. And I give you that, and that is good as gold.
Okay. So it is kind of something similar, but not the same to what Lightning Network works, isn't it? Because in Bitcoin, you have Lightning Network. Essentially, what I do is, I go ahead and deposit X number of funds. The other party also goes ahead and deposits X number of funds, and then the transaction takes place. Is that something similar to that?
It is very similar. I used to work on Lightning Network, and but I think their Lightning Network has a few drawbacks. Like, after you and I have to stand up a Lightning Network, right? And if I shut mine down, that ends it, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So with our system, you don't have that drawback, and it's also Lightning Network is exclusive to the Bitcoin network, whereas we allow interchain, so we're multi-chain.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's say if I have Solana, and the other person, let's say, wants it in a different currency, let's say the Algorand or Ethereum, that thing can still be can still be managed using with Sprynt. Okay, so from a business point of view, do I need to go ahead and use your API to set it up, or how does that thing work?
So we try to make it the onboarding for both the user and the merchant as easy as possible. So you would log in and you would fill out some very simple data, and then you would press that button to launch the smart contracts that you own on all the blockchains. And the advantage of that is that, like, if I'm a customer, I give my money directly to you on your smart contract. And it never is owned by Sprynt or a bridge or any other system. It's like 100% non-custodial.
Yeah, and one thing which we briefly spoke about earlier on, that was when you were mentioning about neobanking. And what I did actually go to your website, and it talked about, real-time optimistic payment protocol, or RTOPP. And it has a very brilliant graph, which explains, neobanking solutions. But Sprynt offers decentralization, censorship resistance, scalability, and capability as well. So I'll definitely go ahead and mention that thing in the show notes. But one question I wanted to ask is, and this is where I actually use ChatGPT, Tim. So I copy-paste that information, put it on ChatGPT, and I asked ChatGPT, okay, can you find out any vulnerability? And it did come up with one vulnerability. So let me just read it out word for word. So what ChatGPT said is that if the protocol involves handling financial transactions and user data, it would have to comply with regulatory frameworks, including any anti-money laundering and KYC requirements. So how can they claim that it is Web 3.0 and censorship resistant? So what is your response to that?
4 stars for ChatGPT. That's an awesome feedback. Yes, going through the regulatory requirements for multiple jurisdictions is today the big burden, at least for right now, a burden. I think I believe firmly that the innovation of Web3 will be it is already acknowledged by banks and many jurisdictions like Hong Kong. I believe Dubai is moving in this direction. So in the end, we look forward to having very friendly regulations. So one of our co-founders is an attorney who used to work with regulations. So I leave a lot of that to her. But there's a lot of components like on-ramp and off-ramp, and these we have partnered with, and they have KYC. So yeah, 3 cheers for ChatGPT. That's payment systems are going through hell today with the regulation.
Absolutely. And a few days rather ago, I'm not sure if you've read about the drama going on regarding Tornado Cash, because
Yeah.
exactly a year ago, the United Department of Treasury, they actually sanctioned a protocol. And what they actually found out too, I believe it was last Thursday, is that because Tornado Cash is recognized as a DAO, which is Decentralized Autonomous Organization, they're actually a legal entity. And because they are a legal entity, the government can actually go ahead and put regulations to it. So kind of having regulatory support is kind of backfiring for Tornado as well. So what does this mean, let's say, for the future of DAO? Because a lot of them we often talk about, when DAO gets legal recognition, it's a great thing for the project. But in case of Tornado Cash, it actually backfired because now what the government is saying, because you're recognized you as a DAO, we have legal jurisdiction to go ahead and penalize you. And I'm not sure if you've seen the news, but both the founders, they have been sanctioned and it's looking really, really bad for them. And they are dealing only with privacy because it is essentially a mixer. So,
I also saw Modi from India that she was saying what we need urgently is some international standards.
Yeah.
And I think that's very true because even in the US, there are certain states that have said that you can have an LLC company that is a DAO, but the owners of that LLC is the DAO. And that's sort of in certain states being held up as an example of people who are using DAOs, but also having bank accounts connected with their LLC that's owned by their DAO. Everything, what we need very desperately to move forward is clarity. I think I can see both sides. I can see the need for stopping guys like Sam Bankman-Fried and so on from going off and doing things. And I can see how regulation has always stifled innovation. And you don't have to stay in crypto. It's, we don't really regulate our stock market. It's the regulations, and particularly penny stocks and such. So it's very easy to use some regulation, but it's very, very hard to implement it. So I understand there's a lot of challenges, but there's lack of clarity, and I don't think there should be lack of clarity today. At least within an organization, there should be clarity. That's all I think has to ask is like, let's have clarity.
That is fantastically said. Now, I was going through your website, that is Sprynt.io, and it also has an image explaining how transactions or the journey of exchange takes place. And under the website, there is a tab called as, Payment Protocol, and it says something about Sprynt Validator Node. So can you tell our listeners, Tim, how does one become a validator for Sprynt, and what are the requirements for it?
This is a little bit in the future. Our goal is to bring what you have in traditional payment rails like Master and Visa. We can challenge a sale if we didn't receive the item, or if we received an item that was inferior, then we would be able to challenge that and potentially get our money back. So we're going to set up nodes and voters essentially who own our token would then be able to look at these challenges and then vote to see whether or not the user should have a refund or not. And I think that goes to sort of, you're very comfortable in payment rails, not so much because merchants are more honest or merchants are more reliable. It's because the credit card is underwriting these errors and then pushing the burden onto the merchant. So we're looking for a thing that can be a little bit more fair with merchant, a way to challenge that's more fair to the merchant, but also gives you as a buyer that same comfort you have when you put your Visa down and order something. And that will set up nodes, and probably next year we'll start defining how to become a node validator on those nodes. Yeah.
And I'm right in saying that is something which Web3 is currently lacking, isn't it? because there is no form of disputes or chargebacks, the fact that everything is decentralized. Am I right in saying is that Sprynt.io might be one of the first to actually venture into that space? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, I have worked for like Algorand, which was one of the first companies, and it used to be a thing where you would have you would like wanted to if you put your money on something and you want to dispute it, you put some money down and then you go through this process and there's voting in the process, and in the end you either forfeit your money you put in or you're refunded. So it's not 100% new, but I think attempts in the past didn't flourish, didn't become you often use, and kind of fell off, and we're reinventing it a little bit and then reviving it.
So am I right in saying that you're kind of merging the Web 2 with Web 3 space? Does that be a perfect way of saying that?
Sorry?
That you're merging the Web 2, the elements of chargeback with Web 3. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, you would be correct. We're taking everything, the best parts of neobanking, which are the low fees and the fast transaction time, and the best of the TradFi incumbent-based pay rails, which are the ability to do dispute resolution and guaranteed delivery, merging that with all the good stuff in crypto that we know about, and trying to be a best of all worlds.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking about it right now, Tim, that when Bitcoin started, there was a project called as Open Bazaar. You should definitely check it out. I'm not sure if you've heard of Open Bazaar.
I've heard of it, but I couldn't describe it.
So that is essentially a project which was created by Amit Thak. He was the guy who actually started BIP, that is Bitcoin Improvement Proposal. So essentially the transactions is only peer-to-peer. And it works only on Bitcoin, and that's where he kicked off this thing about chargebacks. So essentially, if I were to buy something using Bitcoin, and let's say the product is not as per what it is advertised, if I want to do a chargeback or dispute, I put up a request, and the same thing, the token distribution, some of them will go and decide to go and take up the dispute resolution. Unfortunately, the project did not materialize. It got taken by a centralized entity. And now Open Bazaar, the Open Bazaar is something similar, when you log into your PC, that is kind of like a server. So there is no central entity as such. That technically speaking is Web 3.0, because no one has control over your data. But at the same time, the drawback is, you can have any illicit or, notorious activities taking place in Open Bazaar as well. And unfortunately, that is one of the drawbacks, I would say, of, Web 3.0. Now, the next question what I wanted to ask is, Web 3.0 is not just about technology, it is also about reshaping how we interact with the digital world. So what societal impacts does Sprynt.io aim to facilitate, and how does it embody the ideas of decentralization and user empowerment?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with the fact that payments are a big part of global GDP. I think they're like 3 to 4% of global GDP. So first of all, we're unlocking these payment fees. And what I've learned through this journey is, like, I used to pay with 3% fees on my payment, and I used to just say, well, of course, it's going through a lot of banks, there's a lot of people working, and so there's a lot of transaction fees, so I have to pay that. But I realize now there's no real transaction cost per transaction cost. It's all made up because it's easy to get money from people if you take it a nickel here and a nickel dime here. But in the end, when we the same advice that financial advisors give to people when they come in, it's like put money in your bank and have it earn interest and then watch it grow. The reverse effect happens if 3% of all your transactions are being subtracted from you. By the time you're old, you could have a couple $100,000 retirement account sitting in there for you. So he's putting money back into the system. It's also making it more available. So I work with Darius, who has a project in Uganda called Commonlands. It's a really great project, commonlands.org.
Okay. Yep.
And he's working on financial inclusion for people who have never had financial inclusion before. And he's doing that in a very clever way by providing the land grant, or basically verification that they own their land as a starting point, and that's based on their neighbors agreeing that they own that land, and then that becomes an asset that opens the door to financial inclusion. But at the tail end of this, there has to be an ability for money to flow between chains, between countries, and that the difficulty of that is just so large that what's happening is it's building dams, like trying to get money into Uganda or Ethiopia is going to red flag you on a. It'd be delayed 6 months. Your funds will be held, and you'll be in KYC in hell. So using this payment system instantly, and I can't claim we're the only one doing that, but there's a whole group, Stellar Blockchain. We're working on it. A lot of neobanks, M-Pesa, have just opened up all of Africa toward financial inclusion. And a big part of that is just lowering the barrier, the costs and barrier to entries. And it's good that that ability to play in that sphere is available to blockchains, because, as you know, blockchains are very open and very eager to do good in the world. And you having a crypto-based system that breaks down these barriers to sending money to Africa is going to be very transformative.
Absolutely, and the immutability nature of blockchain in a project like Commonlands, I think will definitely benefit in the long run as well, right? And the fact that all transactions are publicly verifiable, it just reduces the risk. And notorious actors can definitely shy away from it. So what I'm going to do is, the show notes, I'll definitely go ahead and mention the details for Commonlands as well.
That would be great.
It make a lot of sense, because at the macro level and probably on the long-term horizons, there are definitely much more benefits of blockchain technology. So definitely beautifully said. Now, what I wanted to ask next is, if I'm a podcast host and other listeners who do want to learn and understand more about the project and the Web3 narrative, how does Sprynt.io offer learning opportunity, or what can enthusiasts like me do in order to get more information, let's say, about yourself, about Sprynt.io? Are there any podcasts, are there any YouTube channels, or what is the sources that we can have?
I have been speaking at blockchain conventions regularly, so we plan to launch some hackathons for the technical folks to help them integrate their systems, because from an API level, honestly, I think we need to step it up. I think we need to step it up more. We have a beta programs where we have a lot of beta users, and they give us a lot of feedback, and they really do impact our product a lot. We change based on on their feedback. But I think that's an area that we need to improve on, is outreaching to the community, educating the community, and then in turn getting the reward of having the feedback of people who like yourself, who are very excited about this area and know more about what the demands are for the customers.
And that just moves towards my next question as well, and that is, in the spirit of Web 3.0, what role do you think, even users or stakeholders play in shaping the project or the evolution of Sprynt.io? Do you think users have a say in which direction the project wants to go as well?
Yeah, I would say they are evil dictators.
It is kind of right, what you said, yeah.
Yeah, we have to do what our customers want. And they are often very, very clear on what they want, the systems that they work with, how they want them to work. And part of taking one's technology hat off is the ability to listen and to realize that making their customers happy is the goal product, and if you don't do that, you may have a lot of cool tech, but you won't have a profitable product. So we're always looking for people who can give us feedback, usability testing, beta testing. Anybody can just log into our site and enter comments and tell us, hey, I don't like the way this is working, and that will get to somebody who will listen very carefully about that.
That is absolutely great. So what I'll do is, the show notes, I'll definitely go ahead and mention, the Twitter ID and even the Telegram ID and quite a lot of other things. Now, the next question, Tim, what I wanted to ask is about, balancing vision and reality. And building, let's say, for Web3 involves navigating between visionary goals and practical implementation. Now, in your journey with Sprynt.io, what challenges have you encountered while developing it? And have you addressed any of these challenges between its innovation and feasibility?
For sure, it's very difficult to build a product where there isn't mass adoption. So you're basically building a portal into Web3, not going to people who understand Web3, and so there's a lot of the interfaces have to be written in a way that's very familiar to Web2, but also contain the innovation of Web3. So doing the UX, UI part, I think is a very, very crucial challenge. If you don't get that right, you're really not going to be able to bring customers to your site. I think another thing is just where are the customers? So a lot of, like, for instance, gamers, they're very, very interested. They're leaning into, like, oh, it would be nice to have ownership of our digital assets. But they're not, like, screaming for it, right? They're not like, I need to own the skins, I need to own my images. But they're leaning into it. So a lot of our customers are on a buying cycle, but they're not all the way down where they're demanding it. They're at a point where, like, tell me what can happen. Tell me what if I own a skin and I go to another game? Can I bring that skin or that NFT with me? So there's more education in the sales process, and I think we solved a lot of problems with our using a DID to go around sort of the bridge, so we don't incur bridge risks. Of course, there are a lot of purists in the decentralized world that haven't really thought about how to move information of payments rather than actually moving the token through bridges, through dexes. And so sometimes that takes a little bit of convincing for the pure techies as well. So it's a pleasant journey. We're having a lot of fun, but we're definitely enjoying being one of the first of blazing the trail here.
Absolutely. And you touch base upon the number of users, and what I tend to do is I look at that radar on a daily basis, and what I tend to do is I try to break it down based on every protocol, let's say at Ethereum or Algorand or EOS, and to be honest, the numbers are really scary. And one example I can think of is, I'm sure you've heard about a project called as Decentraland, which is more to do with metaverse. And you'll be surprised that on one day, if you look at the dollar value, it was only $532. That's it. So within the span of 24 hours, transaction volume was only $532, and Decentraland is valued at, I believe, more than $1.2 billion. It was notoriously famous for, rappers having metaverse over there, but it looks like that project might just be dead unless there are some massive events, that do actually take place. So what you're saying does make a lot of sense. So for our listeners, Tim, who are eager to learn more about Sprynt.io, what are the steps that they can take, and do you have any words for them, or what advice would you like to give them?
I would go to our website, Sprynt.io. It's not Sprynt.io, and read a little bit about our product and our philosophy. There's a link to our white paper or light paper there if you want to get a little bit deeper into the technical details. I think, what people I think are not, I think is the knowledge is not general that today a lot of Web 2 is falling apart. Banks are becoming unbundled. This narrative of Web 3, being a competitor with Web 2 and them butting heads and trying to fight with each other, it's not a true narrative. The true narrative is that like bank branches are closing at 20% per year. Banks are not sustainable, and it has nothing to do with what comes next, which is Web 3. It has to it comes from human behavior, customer behavior, analytics. It comes from the mobile revolution. So Web 3 is not the always the agent of change. It's the solution. But a lot of Web 2 infrastructure is already crumbling. And this is also true of payment. And for this reason, the Web 3 players and the banks are actually not very openly, but a lot of them are creating partnerships because banks know that their technology is old and it's crumbling and it's not agile, so there's no way they can change. So the only way that they can survive as entities is to court the Web 3 players. So in that sort of context, where Sprynt is it's entering where a world where traditional incumbents are already kind of coming apart, and we're seeing a lot of new activity, largely by the neobanks. We're going to be seeing like embedded banking, where banking is no longer managed by a central entity. It's going to be go to the store will launch. This is unavoidable. This is a trend that's not going to reverse, and everybody will be coming to products like Sprynt in order to find a solution. And we don't really care if these potential partners or products are traditional incumbent banks or other Web3 applications or retail stores. I think we fit well into this sort of apocalyptic world, financial world where everything is collapsing. We can be sort of a steady force, and I think that's a solid position to be going in 2023.
That is absolutely beautifully said. And what I'm liking it, based on what you're saying, looks like it's the end users, that is the customers, who will be benefited by it, by being part of the system and by using Sprynt.io. That is absolutely so critical, isn't it? So thank you so much for that. Now, I do have two questions, Tim, and that has nothing to do with Bitcoin or blockchain or cryptocurrency. And the first one is regarding music. What is your favorite genre of music and why?
Okay, I shouldn't admit this, but I like a genre of music called Irish rebel music.
Oh, excellent. That is.
It gets pretty hardcore. It was rebellion in the 1970s, so it gets pretty hardcore language. But I also find something very peaceful about Chinese music. So I live in Vietnam, and I'm hearing a lot of sort of traditional Chinese music, and I find it very peaceful, easy to fall asleep listening to it. So yeah, it's a new kind of music, maybe more peaceful than Irish music.
That is absolutely great. Now, I do listen to heavy metal and extreme metal, so I can, identify what you're talking about. Now, the second question that I have is, regarding sports. Are there any favorite sports personality that you admire, or any sports idol that you have?
You're really bearing, how do you say, making me bare my soul here. So I'm a fairly avid boxing fan. So I like Tyson Fury. I like Usyk. He just fought.
Did you see the controversy that happened yesterday?
It was not a low blow. Usyk should have been
100%
disqualified. Yeah, not a low blow.
I 100% agree. Because I was just trying to look at the rules for Queensberry in terms of, what is it that is identified as a low blow. And Tyson Fury, I do think he just might be the greatest boxer, probably of all time, to be honest.
Yeah.
He might just be the best. It's a shame that Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk probably might never fight. But so the final question is, if between Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk, who would you pick?
I would have to go with Fury because he's as fast on his feet as Usyk, and he's a natural 270. So I think he would wear Usyk down. He would lean on him, and Usyk would get tired around the fifths, and then he would start going to the body because that's where it hurts for Usyk.
And you know what I tell my friends is Tyson Fury is just a faster version and a bigger version of Usyk, isn't it?
Yeah,
just a much bigger version to him. Absolutely.
Yeah. Faster, longer reach, and heavier. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much for that, Billy. Thank you so much, Tim, for this. Really, really appreciate it. Definitely a brilliant conversation. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot for having me.